This is our discussion of the Ageless Brain, again written by Dr. Dale Bredesen. I've prepared a couple of slides as a summary, and I thought I'd just walk through those. And then when we get to the discussion questions, we can talk a little bit about those. First of all, I just want to welcome you and let you know that even if you are here and did not read the book, please don't feel intimidated. We're glad you're here, and we are not going to put any stress on anyone for not reading the book. This is a discussion, and I prepared some slides for that, and we'll go through those and answer any questions you have. And I'm happy to review any part of the book you either didn't read or would like more information on. Okay, so who is Dr. Bredesen? Dr. Bredesen is an MD. He is a pioneer really in Alzheimer's research primarily, but in a broader sense for neurodegeneration. He is applying a lot of his research outside of Alzheimer's and looking at other neurodegenerative diseases. Parkinson's, for one, he does talk a lot about traumatic brain injury, stroke, as well as some on multiple sclerosis as well. He is the founder of Apollo Health, which is his organization for rolling out the ReCODE protocol. And the ReCODE and pre-code, pre being preventative, re being for repairing. That is his protocol, which he has now completed several clinical trials for. Well, it's one clinical trial actually for 6 locations. And he's had success with over 100 patients. And in this book, he's really sort of sharing a lot of what he talks about in his ReCODE protocol, but maybe a little bit on the lighter version. And so this is his, I guess, 4th book, if you will. There's a trilogy for the Alzheimer's ReCODE protocol, and where he has demonstrated that he can reverse Alzheimer's. And this book is a very much simplified version. It's very much prevention focused, and it's not for those necessarily who want to dig deep into the ReCODE protocol, but for those who are still healthy or maybe slightly beginning to see some cognitive challenges. And there is a lot of repetition in this book, but he simplifies it for those of us who are interested in learning more and trying to figure out, if we're healthy, what we can do to help prevent. So what's kind of different in this book than in the other books that he has written? And so I just kind of wanted to talk about that at a high level so you can see that. And really the key message for the Ageless Brain, and that this is the book that we're talking about. The key message is you don't have to wait until you're forgetting names or seeing some sort of symptoms of cognitive decline to start protecting and even upgrading your brain. You can do it today. You don't have to wait until you get symptoms. And as I've sort of mentioned earlier, his prior books are on how to reverse Alzheimer's or cognitive decline, and this book is really on that prevention side. And he really has evidence and stories and research to support his claim that about 99% of brain decline is preventable with these science-backed habits that he's going to share in this book. And that really it's written for the healthy individuals at 35 years old plus who wants to stay healthy. He recommends the age of starting at 35. You absolutely can start earlier. If you've got APO4 genes or alleles, 2 of those, then you should start earlier. But in general, he recommends 35 years old. And this is really I think the crux of how this book is different than some of the other books. And as kind of an overall summary of what's covered in the book, and we'll go into a little more detail, but as a overview, Dr. Bredesen puts forth the data that states that 1 in 3 individuals by the age of 85 will face dementia. He argues that this is not normal. We do not have to accept that. And he wants to get rid of the phrase that, oh, this is normal for my age, because that's inaccurate. And based on his research and what you can do for that, that phrase should go away, because you should have an active, sharp, high functioning brain up to the age of 100 if you follow his suggestions. And really, what is driving that is a mismatch of brain energy and stressors. And if you address those things, those stressors and that energy, diminished energy, you should be able to avoid dementia. I mentioned earlier there's a pre-code and a ReCODE protocol that he has developed, pre being preventive, re being reversal. And those two protocols that he has developed over the last 30 years address the root causes of dementia. 84% of early interventioners can show cognitive gains in his studies. So if you start in the earlier phases, so if you're asymptomatic or you've got some mild cognitive decline, 84% of the people who follow this protocol have shown reversal of their symptoms. And now he has just in October released the results of, well, he hasn't released the results. Let me back up there. He has released preliminary summaries of the research, and they're doing the analysis now. But in a nutshell, they're showing that it's 3.5 to 6.5 times better than any of the other treatments, and that includes the two primary drugs that are out there for Alzheimer's, and he's showing 3.5 to 6.5 times better performance for individuals based on those randomized clinical trials that he's just completed. So as I mentioned, the big takeaway from this is that start in your 30s. If you haven't and you're 90, you're 80, you're 50, you can start today. You don't ever have to wait, is his premise. The sooner you start, the better. The older you get, the more stressors your body has, and the more chances you are of developing dementia. However, he does make the note that genes, this is that APO4 that everyone talks about, and if you have two APO4 genes, you're significantly more likely, 40% more likely to have Alzheimer's, but that doesn't predestine you for Alzheimer's. It does load the gun, and I do like this analogy that he uses, but your lifestyle is what pulls the trigger. So just because you have APO4, like I do, I have two alleles of APO4. And so I do follow his protocol very closely, and I have followed his research very closely, which is why I've chosen to put this book on our reading list. And I do have the confidence that if I follow the protocol, I'm not doomed, if you will, to have Alzheimer's. There are self-assessments and recipes and tracking tools he offers as an easier way if you don't have any symptoms to move this forward. If you do have symptoms, you probably do need to, well, there's no probably about it. You need to follow the full ReCODE protocol, which you can gather in some of his other books. So, the science of brain aging, it's not inevitable. That's just the premise of his book. So how do you do this, and what is the difference? Dr. Bredesen looks at 36 metabolic holes, and there's this parameter of 36 metabolic holes that you or anyone could potentially have that can influence and trigger Alzheimer's. The goal is to analyze those 36, figure out which of those affect you. It's not typically all 36. It's typically 3, 4, 5 that you need to look at. And if you plug those holes, you can reverse the symptoms of Alzheimer's. What are those holes? Things like insulin that's out of whack, so diabetes or instant insulin resistance, hormones. That's especially true for women going through menopause. Nutrition, there could be gaps in your nutrition. Uh, and there could be gaps in your nutrition, and there could be toxins that are affecting that. And there are a range of toxins, so things from air pollution, water pollution, exposure to mold is one of those. And so if you look at those, and there are those things are in those 36 buckets, then you can address those. And if you don't address those are the things that are causing your synapses to prune and to create um, the amyloid that ends up what so many other people historically have thought was the cause of Alzheimer's. But what we now know is that trying to address and remove the inflammation in the brain caused by these 36 holes. And if you look at what reverses it, it is, we're going to go through that in detail, but in general, you can reverse this and maintain your brain's neuroplasticity, which will help protect uh, uh, your cognitive power in the long run. Oh, excuse me. I believe I have skipped quite a few slides here. I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, here we go. Back to where we were supposed to be. So what he talks about in his book is how to detect early decline, and this is before you even really notice any of the symptoms. And he's got sort of a couple of different areas, and I thought maybe I'll start on the right side of this slide before we get to the left. One is he talks about the four phases of cognitive decline. One is asymptomatic. Your scores for your MoCA test, etc., are normal. But if you do a PET scan, you may find some p-tau, some amyloid plaques, etc., or some damage or low flow in your brain, which would show that you are on your path to cognitive decline. This phase usually lasts about 20 years. So from the time you're born to the time you're 20 years old, no one is typically symptomatic in that time frame. He is starting to see earlier and earlier in age patients that are showing some symptoms after that sort of 30-year mark. And that phase is called the subjective cognitive impairment, SCI for short. And that is where you still will see normal MoCA scores, but you feel something's not quite right. You're not able to recall words, you're missing people's names, you are having a little bit of memory lapse on certain small items, but you, for all practical reasons, seem normal, and only maybe those very, very close to you would notice any difference. The next phase of cognitive decline is mild cognitive impairment. And this is where you would have an abnormal score for memory, your MoCA test. You would have some apparent decline. Not only just those around you would notice it, but maybe those that you work with, people that you interact with on a daily basis. You're still able to manage your daily activities, however, and so you can take care of yourself. And a lot of people, when they're ignoring the signs or which happen in that subjective cognitive impairment phase, the SCI phase, they start to get tested in the MCI phase. And you still can reverse this according to Dr. Bredesen's protocol in phases 2 and 3. He's had a lot of luck and a lot of positive research and a lot of great case studies that are shared in the book for those two phases. And the last phase is dementia, what I think most everybody is very aware of and cognizant of what that looks like. And that's where individuals have difficulty performing daily activities. They can't dress themselves, they have trouble managing their finances, and they lose their continence. So those are the four phases that Dr. Bredesen talks about. And I think these four phases are fairly well accepted out in the common medical field. And so what Bredesen is saying is that you can detect very early on some signs of decline, right? So you will have subtle signs like brain fog, word finding issues, mood shifts. He talks a lot about emotional regulation. You can use your MOCA test, and this is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. That's what MOCA stands for. It's available on the Apollo Health site. It has its own website. You can use that to test and give yourself a baseline. And Dr. Bredesen recommends doing that baseline test or retaking it about every 3 to 5 years, depending on whether you're feeling any symptoms or not. This subtle signs situation that when you're seeing these types of subtle signs, you're probably in this subjective cognitive impairment phase, SCI. That's when it's early on. Some of the tests that you can take for biomarkers to determine outside of just the MOCA cognitive test are blood tests for your APO4 gene. We talked a little bit about that. HSCRP, which measures inflammation in your body. You can certainly do a blood test to take that. That's something I actually have taken every 3 months because I do have a very overactive immune system and creates a lot of inflammation. And as I mentioned, I do have 2 of those APO4 alleles. So I do monitor my blood very often. And vitamin D, I also take vitamin D. And I have taken the MOCA test score myself, and I probably take it about every 6 months versus every 3 months because I don't really have any signs of it. But I do notice that it does vary. Some months I'll do better than others. And so I would recommend for anyone who is having some of these subtle signs and sort of trying to figure out whether they need to be concerned or not, next time you go get your blood work done, take a look at this and test for your APO4 genes, understand what your inflammation levels are. And vitamin D is certainly something you can take there. You have to take a very high amount to be able to see any sort of significant negative impact from that. And as I've mentioned, Dr. Bredesen talks about how the decline for neuroplasticity, I'm sorry, for Alzheimer's can start 20 to 30 years before symptoms. So testing way before you're seeing any symptoms can certainly help you identify if you're at risk and help you to manage that in a more proactive way if needed. So this is kind of getting into the nitty gritty just a little bit. Dr. Bredesen talks about the Fantastic Five, the things you can do. As I mentioned in this book, he's really trying to help simplify the ReCODE protocol. And he has sort of, I'm going to say, dumbed it down for us out here in the mainstream so we can understand what actually needs to be done. So the Fantastic Five are move, be sure you fuel your body correctly, restore it, manage your stress, and connect socially. The other two he throws in as I would say he throws them as a bonus options for you, and this is if you're having some challenges. But he does in a general sense recommend you go ahead and start these, especially if you've got concerns, right? If you're in that APO4 bucket and you have those alleles and that gene is in your body, then you are triggered, then you should maybe take a little more proactive, which is how these other two things come into play here, the plus two. So what does he recommend for moving? It's every day, move every day. I think that's a big difference from what we might hear in the mainstream, which is, 3 to 4 days a week, right? 30 minutes to an hour, 60 minutes of 3 to 4 days a week. His suggestion is every day and to the zone two cardio plus strength training. And he does talk about some other new like barometric oxygen chambers. He recommends doing that as part of the protocol if you've got the APO4. And he talks about some blood flow restriction bands that are new. This was new to me. I really wasn't aware of that, but they've started it in Japan, and he really recommends that as part of his protocol. So exercise. Fuel. So what should you eat? He recommends a mild ketosis type keto flex diet. So primarily plants plus time restricted eating. If you've got APO4, he wants you to look at a smaller window of 10 to 12 hours and maybe 12 to 14 hours if you're not in that bucket. Sleep, this probably is no surprise to anybody, 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And he really talks a lot about the impact of sleep apnea and how aggressively that should be treated and to not let it um, go untreated, even if you suspect it. Get tested immediately. He's a big fan of that. Stress management, chill out. He talks a lot about just chilling out, resting, not and building time in for just thinking and for not scrolling on your phone, but socializing as part of that stress reduction. Getting out in nature, spending time laughing. He's got some interesting statistics in there on the value of laughter as well, which were sort of eye-opening to me. And he talks a lot about social interaction and finding your purpose and how that helps you regulate your emotions, which are, if you've ever known anybody with Alzheimer's, that emotional regulation, especially in that mild cognitive phase and even in and certainly in the dementia phase, is a big component of how your body changes. And this social interaction is not just for reducing your stress, but it's and helping build those new pathways. It's to help you maintain capability of regulating your emotions in a much faster way and an ongoing consistent way. And one of the things that really stood out to me is this lifelong learning component that he put in there. It's not new to me from a neuroplasticity standpoint, but he talked about really setting goals every day and building cognitive challenge into your daily routine. So, incorporating small challenges on a daily basis, medium challenges on a monthly basis, and hard challenges, setting one each year. And a small challenge could be something like, well, if you go to a coffee shop to get a coffee every morning, then go to a different coffee shop. Try a different type of drink. Or if you have a certain game you play every day that you enjoy, don't just change a different type of crossword, learn a completely different game, like a word finding game, for example. So switch it up every day. It's okay if you repeat some days because it's something you enjoy, but and it's good to sort of strengthen those synapses that you built with the changed activity. But creating novelty and nuance into your daily routine. The medium learnings would be something you would do on a monthly basis. That would be Well, he gave a good example of learning to play backgammon. So pick a game you don't play with that social that you need to learn the rules, and you would need to play it a couple of times every month or a couple of times every week, or maybe at least 2 times a week to really learn it and figure out how to play that well. And the other example he gave for hard, like a hard challenge, was, let's say you've set a goal to travel to Portugal this year. Well, your long-term goal could be learning Portuguese language, and you set sort of monthly goals within that year-long goal to help break it down into smaller components. So I really did like how he talked about creating that novelty on an ongoing basis and not waiting until you get symptoms. And that helps create resiliency in your brain so that if you do have a hiccup in life, a spouse dies, you lose your job, something along that nature, your brain is able to take that better. You're able to work through that without affecting your cognition, without losing your overall mood in a general sense. And the last +2 that he talked about really was targeted supplements. And I've got a little bit more information on that. He While there are a lot more supplements, he recommends if you have, if you found you've got certain types of decline, let's say you've got, a toxic situation, some sort of toxin that you're working with, or your body doesn't, there are certain other genes that are not functioning well. So there's a much longer list of supplements that he goes into in the book, but these are sort of the basic 7. And if you take these 7, you're covering 80% of what an individual would need. So you can take these and you can feel like you're covered if you don't do any other testing of blood work, etc. And I of this list, let's see, I take omega-3, vitamin D3. I do not take magnesium, but I did buy some and I need to start that. And I do take methylated B complex. I do not do the curcumin or lion's mane, and I have done ashwagandha in the past, but I feel I don't need it anymore because it makes me a little bit too sleepy. Uh, and Martin, welcome. Are there any of these supplements that you take on a regular basis?
Hi, Sherry. Thank you for asking. Well, I take a little bit of vitamin D3 just because I'm low. I mean, it's not sort of just an empiric, you need to take it, but my annual physical labs usually come back as borderline low. So I take that because there's a deficiency. The other ones, I occasionally I've taken magnesium in the past because of a cardiology recommendation, but that's really about it. I think a lot of people will say that, if you have a healthy, well-balanced diet, you don't need to take these. So, there's different schools of thought here about, how to approach this. There's a school of thought that if you have a healthy diet, you really don't need to take these. Other people saying, no, that's not true. You actually need to have sort of larger doses than, what the FDA may regulate at.
Yeah, and he does talk about that in this book. He goes through that, and I guess vitamin D3 was and omega-3. Those are the 2 that he recommends. It's like it's almost impossible to get the recommended daily levels, even with a diet that's well balanced. And so those are the top 2 he recommends. He did say that it's very difficult to get magnesium as well. I and as I said, I don't take the lion's mane or the ashwagandha at this point. So I do think it's a very personal uh, protocol. And I think that is what he talks about, right? This is a personalized program for you to decide. And you do have to get your blood work to see, and he recommends every 3 months to see where you are and what you do need. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, what I wanted to do at the beginning of this call was sort of summarize the book for those who had not read it. And when I was going through this book, several quotes just really stood out to me, and so I made note of those. And I think these quotes, they really do summarize the book, in my opinion. And I just wanted to share those with the group. And the first one, your brain is not a fixed organ that must decline. It's dynamic and it's designed to improve with the right inputs. I think the brain, it really is the only organ that can repair itself and regrow. I don't think that there is anything else. And Martin, you can hold my feet to the water on this one, but I don't think there is another organ in our body that has that ability to repair itself in such an extensive way.
Maybe the liver a little bit.
Yeah, maybe the liver a little bit, right? But would you say, Martin, that it's as extensive as the brain?
Um, I guess it depends on what you mean as extensive. I mean, the brain's sort of a very elegant organ, very highly specialized, whereas the liver, you can take a piece of the left lobe, right lobe, anywhere, and it's going to look the same. It's going to have the same function. So um, the brain is certainly, in its reparative state, is in a much more elegant process than a sort of almost vanilla approach you would have for an organ like the liver. Where so it can repair itself, but then again, I think it's a lot easier to do that when you don't have this specialized area for memory and speech and executive function and
Yeah,
behavior and vital signs, all that sort of thing. So
yeah, yeah.
it's a very
Okay, good.
different sort of reparative process.
Yeah. I this next quote is
By the way, it's also the only organ that will talk to you.
that's that's very funny, Martin. I like that. Yeah, uh, sometimes it never shuts up.
Yes.
Yeah, that's funny. Um, so, and I think this just kind of goes with what we were talking about. The mild cognitive impairment is the check engine light of your brain. Ignore it, and you're definitely headed for trouble. He uses this analogy and then analogy of a bicycle going up the hill. And in normal circumstances, you can go up the hill with, let's just say you've been to the grocery and you've picked up a couple bags of groceries and you're going up a small incline of a hill, and normally you can do that. But as you lose cognitive capability, which is sort of like getting a flat tire in that bicycle, then it's much harder to do and create that cognitive load, and you have to then start dropping things off of your groceries because it's just too hard to get up the hill, and those things would be cognitive capacities. And he had a I really he uses that analogy throughout the book, and but I did like this check engine light because it's so relatable. Everybody knows exactly what that means, and you can't ignore the check engine light in your car, and you don't fuel your car with inappropriate fuel, right? You can't put diesel in a car that is for unleaded gasoline. So you have to treat your body the same way. Sometimes at NPA we struggle with what the right analogy is. A lot of people like to use the software analogy and operating system, but I really found this the engine light and the transportation analogy really helpful. And these the fork in your sneakers are your more powerful than any Alzheimer's drug currently on the market, and he has great data to show that. If if you take anything away from this book, to me, because he's had more research that he included in this book than he's had in his last three books, it is that you have control over your life over your brain's cognitive function, and that other earlier comment that we talked about, which was your genes may load the gun, but it is your lifestyle that really pulls the trigger, and with regards to Alzheimer's, and it was just very obvious, and I think to me that's almost the most powerful takeaway. You are in control. You really are. And this last quote was loneliness shrinks your hippocampus faster than almost anything else, except maybe chronic anger. And he talks a lot more in this book about the value of social interaction and has quite a bit of research to support his comments on that. And I think I did not realize overall how you hear about that as a societal issue, especially for individuals who age. But I don't think I really fully appreciated the impact that it has and how much that does affect your brain. So it's not just the lack of stimulation, right? It's that quick interaction that you get from social engagement that causes those synapses to fire. And it's that multi-sensory impact because you're listening, you're watching their movements, their body movements, you're trying to anticipate how you're going to respond. So that really stood out in this book compared to the others. But the loneliness on top of all that, I did not realize how negative that was on your body. And especially when you compare it to chronic anger, right? Which that seems pretty obvious on the impact that would have. So I also wanted to include these takeaways. To me, there's some in here that we just talked about, like the loneliness is as bad for the brain as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. I thought the statistics here would really kind of send these messages home, and I was shocked at the impact that that had. And I know I'm going from bottom to top here, but the saunas 4 to 7 times per week cut dementia risk by 65%. That was shocking to me. I really had no idea how impactful that was. Especially you hear now about so much of the cold baths and being so important, and especially that alternating from cold to hot, cold to hot. Well, I cannot do the cold. I just is not in my DNA to be able to do that. But I can do the saunas. And so that was very, I guess, inspirational for me. I am lucky enough to have one in my basement, and so I do use it. But I usually it about 2 or 3 times a week. So I am going to be increasing my use of that and turning up the heat on it. You need to get to close to 100, between 150 and 165 degrees in your sauna for it to have an impact. And then back to our comment just a second ago about you are in control of your brain. The 8 to 10,000 steps a day, he had a lot of data that confirms what the social norm is on that, and it really does make an impact. And is one of that exercise in general, not necessarily just walking, but exercise in general is one of the strongest predictors of brain volume, which means that you've got the cognitive capacity. And then this last bullet, 12 to 16-hour daily fasting is more powerful for the brain than any single drug studied. There's a lot of conversation around the lack of support or that the drugs that are out there for Alzheimer's provide. And his latest research, as we talked about earlier, are 3.5 to 6 times more effective, or it shows that ReCODE is 3.5 to 6 times 3.5 to 6.5 times more effective than the drugs that are out there. And that this fasting, because it cleans out your system, your brain, your glial cells can work, and they get rid of all of the inflammation and toxins that you accumulate, and that fasting really has a high impact on that. So, and he recommended 12 hours for those individuals who don't have APOE4 or are symptom free. And if you do somewhere between the 14 to 16 hours, if you do, I try to do 14 hours. Some days I'll do 16, but to me, that's very hard. Because I can't maintain a consistent schedule. So I do think that I do find I feel a lot better when I do that. Martin, do you have any thought on any of these? Anything surprise you here?
Well, it certainly goes back to the old dictum that what's good for the heart is good for the brain. So, the walking 8 to 10,000 steps a day, I usually try to get in 15,000 myself every day.
That's
The, the,
fantastic.
the daily fasting, I think that there's sort of less data for that, but we need to continue to study that. Loneliness, absolutely. Um, that's that goes back to the networking and everything. And why do people have healthy aging? I mean, you rarely see people have healthy aging if they have a poor network, social network.
Yeah.
That's a real big issue. The sauna one is intriguing. It's association doesn't necessarily connote causation. It was only done in Swedish men. So, does it work in Swedish women? Does it work in everybody? Is it because it's mimicking exercise, meaning that, it dilates blood vessels, gets the heart rate
Hmm.
up, is sort of a stressor, which is what exercise is. It's a controlled stress to the body.
Yeah.
And so I'm waiting. I'm very interested to see more data to come out on this. But a lot of people talk about that study. And, it'll be interesting to see more data come out. And one of the things I'll mention before I forget is that starting yesterday afternoon through till Friday is one of the probably the second most important Alzheimer's conference in the world is ongoing. This year it's in San Diego. It's called CTAD, Clinical Trials in Alzheimer's Disease. So
Okay.
you'll probably see a lot in the press over the next few days about announcements of clinical trials, animal work, genetic studies, etc. So I'm very interested to see too, and following it very closely with friends who are there right now.
Yeah, to see what comes out of that. Thank you for
Yes.
mentioning that. So I'll keep my ear to the ground on that as well. I was wondering because Dr. Bredesen's clinical trials that he's just completed, I haven't seen the analysis come out. I'm wondering if he's um, on the agenda there. I'll take a look at that and see if that's maybe he's going to present his data because he's sort of given some summaries, but they haven't completed the full analysis yet. Any other well, you said you were waiting to see what comes out. Is there anything you're expecting to come out, Martin?
Yeah, I'm expecting some of the studies on tau to come out. And I'm also interested to see if there's any more data on the GLP-1s like semaglutide
Mm.
right now, Wegovy. Um, there was a big splash in the news probably about a week or two ago that the phase 2 study failed in Alzheimer's disease.
Mm.
But there's so much information there that needs to be vetted yet. Like, how well does that one cross the blood-brain barrier, for example? What dose should we be using? How long would you consider dosing for? So, I don't think that sort of puts the nail in the coffin that GLP-1s might not be good for AD, but I am hoping for additional review of that data on a more detailed basis.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize that it had failed. I knew they were doing the study, so thanks for the update on that. So while I really love Dr. Bredesen's work, I did think that there were a few things maybe that weren't so positive in his book. And so I did want to share those and see if anybody had any comment on them. He is such a huge fan of keto, and he has a lot of data that he presents in here. And I can't really say I argue with the data that he presented so much, but there it's just so much more data on all sides of this. I really feel like every time we come to the keto conversation, the vegetarian, which is primarily vegetarian, he's recommending meat maybe once a week, and primarily seafood. Uh, I just it still left me very with a big question mark in my head because I would like to see it, all of that data compared side by side by side. And there was some data in there that I had not heard before. But I will say it's somewhat repetitive because all three of his books prior to this really go through the keto evangelism, if you will. And I didn't feel like I really learned anything new about it. And so for me, that was a little bit of a disappointment. Because as I said, I'm ready to have some sort of meta-analysis done on all of these different types of eating and diet and how they affect your system. Um, I did feel like the supplement list was a little bit short in here, although I know that the purpose of this book is to simplify it. And I do feel like that giving somebody sort of these are the top seven is a great way because it can be complex and kind of confusing. But he doesn't really go through the exact doses or the brands that he recommends in this particular book. And I know he does have his own brands that he promotes. So maybe he was trying to sort of stay away from that a little bit, but it left you needing to still go do the homework on that. And I do think it was somewhat very US focused because they to do his protocol is very expensive, and to do all of the tracking, et cetera, that needs to be done, it's very expensive. You can't do it without like an Aura ring to manage your sleep or some sort of monitoring system, a watch, for example, to make sure you get all of your steps in. And then you need a computer usually to analyze all of that. So I do think that it is complicated, and it is complicated because it's personalized, but I do think it leaves people who are not in a certain socioeconomic situation able to use it effectively. And then the last thought here was I felt like even though he did talk a lot about loneliness and that was the new part to me. I do think that he underplays the emotional health and trauma role, because those things can be significantly important with causing Alzheimer's and cognitive decline specifically. And I think that's not an area that was very well covered. Well, and I think we have that's a good summary of the book. If there are any questions anybody wants to pose, we can do that. These are some of the questions that I thought I would just put up. And if you haven't had a chance to read the book, I can kind of walk through these. And we did talk a little bit about these. Um, Martin, I know you have a couple people in your life that are, I mean, everybody does, right? That is going through Alzheimer's. I don't think there's a family that's untouched by that. Is there anything that we've kind of discussed thus far that would sort of make you want to recommend this book to somebody in your life?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a good read. I mean, there are, I like your equipoise here on it because I mean, there's certain things I would say are, are very mainstream. Other things that are more speculative in here, but I think the sort of the main themes here are very important for people. And he does it in a way that encourages you, excites you, and sort of motivates you to want to go in this direction. Not everyone probably is data driven. I mean, I'm very data driven. I have a Fitbit. I use it for a lot of different things, from number of steps a day to calories burned to hours slept. So yes, I would. I mean, I think in general, it would be good for people to read this, maybe talk with some of their healthcare providers about it. Not that necessarily they might have read it, but they can give their sort of thoughts on this as well, and help guide them and sort of, you want to be sort of a partner in your own healthcare. You don't want to go into a doctor's office and sort of be told what to do all the time, or, be asking, what should I do? You want it to be more sort of like a partnership, where there's some back and forth discussions on things to get right. I do agree with him also that these are a lot of the things you need to start, early on in life. Certainly, midlife is so important. Just when people are getting their careers underway and their lives are going crazy is exactly the time where they need to make sure that they don't put on that more 20 pounds, that they're not getting 5.5 hours of sleep a night. All of these things are so important because, when you get to 60, 70, 75 years old, I mean, your ability to sort of control these things is going to be a lot less than if you were 30 or 40.
Yeah, I echo that. It's so much harder as you get older to put these programs in place. And if you haven't done that, I've been doing the exercise along and along, right? Your whole life, you've built up such, those habits are hard to break. And that's what it is. Those are lifestyle habits. And just having, I think back to my childhood, which was junk food ridden. I mean, and I'm still a lover of Little Debbie's, right? And I will have one. Maybe about once a year, I will have a Little Debbie when I go to visit my cousin who has them, and I love them so much. But it's because I was used to eating them growing up, and my husband won't touch it. And
Oh,
yeah, and it's a habit, right? Those are things that I just grew up with, and I wish, and I'm trying to raise my children differently and have those habits so they don't have to fight that as they get older. So the more information we get, and I think is, one of the points he does make in here that I didn't pull out is that things are changing so quickly and the data is coming there's so much more data that's coming to help guide us that he does feel that in another 5 years or so that you will have the information you need to even be more precision oriented to really tackle your specific challenges. Um, so he leaves you feeling very hopeful and very empowered. And I like that. And I like the stories that he told, the case studies of people. And he was very honest about how he was, not able to get certain people all the way back to their original state and why. So I felt like it was a very honest discussion overall. And I think that is sort of drawing us to an end. I did want to recommend to anyone who has not read his earlier books that The End of Alzheimer's the program that he writes, he wrote that book in 2020, which is the deep dive. And this is the sort of the follow on, which includes some additional research that he had incorporated. It's also much more detailed and goes into extensive data. And I do think he probably wrote this current book to counter that book because you can leave that book feeling very overwhelmed. It is an extensive program that is hard to follow, and you often need help to follow it. So I do like the fact that he wrote this book to help make it simple for those of us who don't need the full program. But I think if you know anyone at all who might be interested and need this, you want to look at the End of Alzheimer's program book as well. And there's a ageless brain challenge on their website that you can go to and use. And then there's this quick checklist just to kind of get you started rapidly that I think is also very valuable too. I've used that quick start checklist myself and shared it with quite a few people because you got to start somewhere, right? And that's just a real simple, easy list to look at. And just to kind of close this out with the sort of key takeaway I think from the book is getting older is inevitable. You can't stop Father Time, but getting cognitively older is optional. And I do think he proves his case very well in the book with that. So I will open it up. Martin, do you have any other comments before we close out? Anything you'd like to add?
I think the book raises some important themes of making sure that people feel like they have control over their destiny, that things aren't inevitable, and that they try to start adhering to a lot of these principles as soon as possible. I mean, they're real, and we'll find out more data as time goes on. But I think he's on to some very good points here.
Yeah, very good. Well, Martin, thank you for joining us and adding all of your valuable insight with your scientific background. It really does help give good perspective. So thank you.
Thank you. Enjoyed
Okay,
it.
good. Good night.
Have a good night. Bye now.
Bye-bye.